Hi everyone, this is Norman Kochnick here on Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochnick. I have, as my usual, regular colleague and counterpart, Chris Vernon from, I'm guessing yet again, not very sunny.
It's glorious today. I'll give you that. Sun's
Ah.
out in a bit for a walk, so it's lovely today.
So a glorious temperature in England is 12 degrees Celsius, is that right?
It's not that warm, trust me.
All right, well,
a balmy 6 degrees, as Richie Benno would say.
Well, everyone, today we'll be talking about, obviously, the Australia versus India Test match. We've now reached the end of the third day's play, and again, India's performed out of their skin. The two of their, or actually three players that are virtually all debutants. Between all three, they've only faced 10 balls, or bowled 10 balls. It's quite incredible. So that they're their efforts. So we'll talk about first. We'll also secondly talk about the current game between England and Sri Lanka. And it's unfortunate Sri Lanka have done a lot better in their second innings, but not good enough at this point. They look like they're in a bit of danger. And the third topic will be questions from the viewers. It's a topic that Chris and I have discussed that we'll bring up in regards to the question that you wanted to ask us. We've looked through the commentary and feedback on our posts, and we've seen quite a few things, and Chris will lead that conversation as the third thing today. So let's get started. Again, Australia and India are locked in the battle of the 1-all at the moment, and they're into the fourth test at the Gabba, which is traditionally the first test of the series, but it's actually the fourth test this time. After 3 days of cricket, very enthralling, I'm sure you'll agree, Chris. And it's one of those matches where still a result's pending, despite the weather. And I think that there's every chance that India could actually win it, despite the fact they've been behind for what is most of the 3 days. Australia scored 369 all out, with Labuschagne scoring a very competent century. But India, despite stuffing around early on in their innings and getting to 20-30 scores, they found two wonders of the world, as in Washington Sundar, sounds very much like a Bollywood or a movie star. Good old Washington scored 62, and his partner Shardul Thakur, who came in as a bowling all-rounder, scored 67 magnificent runs. They both combined to make a partnership of 123, which is a seventh wicket record partnership, not seen since 1991, when the likes of Kapil Dev and Prabhakar batted together at that time. So it's quite remarkable. What are your thoughts on the game, Chris?
It was brilliant. I watched the first session on the first day. Obviously, a great start for India, getting two openers out fairly cheaply. I then saw Labuschagne got dropped at gully by Rahane, I think it was. If he catches that, then it could be an entirely different story of the Test match, really. But he's a fantastic player, isn't he? Interesting stats on Labuschagne, and it's actually similar to Rohit Sharma, how contrast his home and away averages is. We're going to talk about potentially later opening bats in Test cricket, but Rohit Sharma's average, I think, is 88 in India and 14 tests and 26 away from home, which is just phenomenal, really. And I was looking at it's similar to Labuschagne's averages, 85 at home and 40 away, which, no one's knocking a 40 average away from home in Test cricket. That's probably up there with the best of them, but massive difference. And I think that just goes to show that you can't drop him on 20 or 30 and expect to still compete. But I think India, it's under par. I think from what I saw on Twitter and social media from my Australian friends and fans, that they sort of thought 450 might have been a more competitive first innings score. So 360, you're always in the game, aren't you?
Absolutely. 369 compared to 336 is level pegging. Warner batted with Marcus Harris there for about 6 overs. They're none for 21. Warner scored 20 of the runs, but he injured himself on one of the very early runs where he dived and kept his cool, but he definitely re-injured his groin, and I reckon he'll be struggling. He may not be able to bat tomorrow. That's my prediction, because he looked like he's done more damage to his already existing groin problem. Unless he's injected to the hilt, he will probably bat with a lot of difficulty. The reality is that Australia are going to rely on the likes of Labuschagne, Smith and Warner.
Yep.
And if they don't go well, I'm actually predicting they're saying they're going to set a total of 270. including the 30-run lead, 300 lead, and give that to what India can play in a, say, a 4-session period with rain pending. I think they'll be struggling to get that many runs, actually, Australia, because imagine the level of confidence Washington Sundar will have when he bowls, and the likes of Shardul will have when he bowls. They've just gone and taken 3 wickets each, and it's scored 60-odd runs each. They're going to feel like Ian Botham or something, as far as they're going to think they're suddenly the new Ian Botham, both of them, and could be competing. And then you've got Natarajan took 3 wickets, and it's going to be in a mental form, I call it. I think their mental state is clear. They actually are convinced they can actually at least draw, if not win the match. Quite incredible, actually.
Do you think that Australia will be quite aggressive with a declaration? Obviously, they need to win. What's more important to them to protect? Would they rather risk losing the series to try and win, or would they don't want to risk losing at all? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. There's no hope they're not going to try and win the series. They're going to risk. There's an element of risk about what they'll do. They'll think it's a calculated risk, but they can't set 400 and expect India. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to take risks and go around the 270 mark in terms of time as a maximum. They can't afford to go any higher than that. They won't have the chance of time. The problem is Tim Payne is proving to be very brittle with his captaincy. Even in the game so far, yet again, there were some bowling decisions that I thought were rather strange. When Washington Sundar and Shardul were batting well, there was a lot of predictability about the short balls they were bowling to them because they were handling them so well. Of course, when it came to the tail, the very tail, like Siraj and the like, that worked. Saini looked awful. He actually batted with his injury as well, which was unusual. Anyway, I don't think Australia can. They're not in a very happy state, to be really honest with you. They may have a 50-run lead at the moment, but they could easily be skittled for 200, and that gives India a fighting chance. And India will then be able to somewhat control the match because Australia's bowlers, Hazelwood took 5. Stark took 2, along with the likes of Cummins. They all bowled well, but this a very good point was brought up earlier to me. Australia scored 369 against a substandard bowling attack, you have to say, in terms of experience. Only could get 369, yet India could get 336 against the so-called best bowling attack with a lesser batting side. That actually is extremely positive in terms of the way India approach this match. Really, they should be skittled for a low score, and Australia should have got a big score. That's traditionally what happens, but it hasn't happened here. It's an extremely interesting situation, and I'm concerned for England actually because England doing well in Sri Lanka, but I think they're going to have a very difficult Indian side to play. The Indians will be up for it when England come. It'll be an intriguing battle. That'll be our next discussion for sure.
No, absolutely, and I think that. I think that long term, looking at the way that the Indians have approached the series at the moment with Australia, I think that the English will be very confident and take some good notes going down under this winter. You know, I don't think that greatest will in the world to the Indian bowling attack in this series. Archer, Broad, Anderson, and probably Wood and Stokes are a better bowling attack, a better seam attack career-wise. And at the moment, you know, Siraj and Saini might go on to take 500 Test wickets each. I doubt it, but they might do. But, you know, I think that England will look at it and say, well, if this bowling attack can bowl that well in Australia, ours can certainly do the same. And I think that will cause, I think Australia will have to really look at their side and look at the team and say, you know, the English are going to be up for this. You know, they're going to want to win. And, you know, if this is how we perform in this series, and, you know, we've got some looking at Cameron Green obviously has come into this series as a big, you know, the next best thing, would play in the side as a batter or a bowler. I think he's gone 42 or 43 overs without a wicket now in his Test career, which is a fairly sizable chunk. You know, I think that's got to be up there with, especially as a guy who is a frontline bowler. What's the Australian and Indian, you know, the guys in the comments, what's the view on the view on him and his Test career so far?
Well, at this point in time, his batting certainly is proving quite worthwhile, no doubt. His bowling, it's certainly, look, he's still very young-boned in terms of his age. Tells anyone that he's got a few years to go before he actually develops. Not unlike what happened to Pat Cummins, actually, as well. He's much taller. He's almost 2 metres tall. He's got the height going for him. And he's fielding a gully at the moment where he never normally fields, yet he's taking every catch that's going near him. So I think his all-round capability is very strong. He hasn't taken a wicket, which is probably affecting him mentally a little bit. But I reckon they're going to persist with him until he starts taking wickets, and then watch out. He will be something. I think there's a lot. I mean, Ben Stokes, when he came out to Australia, one of the first times, did extremely well. There was still a pretty raw talent at that stage. his batting was pretty good. His bowling was okay, and over time, his bowling has improved greatly, and his batting's gone through the roof. So there's a lot of similarities between Stokes and Green, to be really honest with you, as long as he keeps fit. Yeah. All right. As far as the test is concerned, it probably will end up being a draw, but I think Australia will approach it to actually win and won't succeed in doing that. And they could tumble and have India actually win due to their mistakes. So it's an amazingly intriguing next couple of days. Weather will play a major factor. I'm not sure I mentioned the fact that it's 60% rain for the fourth day and 80% rain chance for the fifth day. They're saying 8 millimetres tomorrow and 15 millimetres, up to 15 millimetres on the last day. But that could be around the traditional tropical zone, like the tropical time of 3, 4 p.m. Dump, not unlike Sri Lanka, dump and then go. So I don't think it's going to affect play that much. It will somewhat, but it won't be as dramatic. Anyway, we'll leave that match at that point. I think it's very well discussed there. Let's move to England versus Sri Lanka, which I'm very interested in. I just noticed that England used no less than 7 bowlers in their innings.
Yeah,
which is a bit. Why would they use 7 bowlers?
I think that we would have wanted to go in with 3 spinners. I think especially at Gaul, or in Sri Lanka in general, I think that the pitches are even more so than India. I think that they are very spin friendly. They open the bowling with a spinner, so I think they would have wanted to play Moeen Ali. Obviously, he landed in Sri Lanka and tested positive for COVID straight away, which then ruled Chris Wokes out as well because he they shared a taxi together to get into the airport.
Oh my God!
So Moeen Ali had to isolate for 2 weeks. I think he would have played. I think that they want to pick 3 spinners. So Joe Root bowled 11 overs for 19, I think, in the second innings.
And Dan Lawrence as well.
I'm not sure if Dan Lawrence bowled.
He bowled 2 overs actually. Yeah.
Okay. He's got a very odd action. He bowls friendly off spin. I think he's an option, but I think his first class career he's not taken any more than sort of 30 wickets. So right. I think he's a bit try and burgle a wicket, you know what it's like. So, but apart from that, seamers wise, they've picked Sam Curran, they've got Mark Wood in there, they've got Stuart Broad. So it's just an option, and Curran just has this incredible ability, just to a bit of a golden arm. I think that's kind of his, especially in the media here. He's a lucky charm. We seem to win when he plays. He seems to just pick wickets up out of nowhere. And I think in the second innings, the opening bat Pereira just got a short wide one and just cut it straight down third man's throat, and Sam Curran almost looked embarrassed when he took the wicket. But I mean, if you've got a guy like that in the side, then that's got to be a benefit. But I think that he's a really nice cricketer, Sam Curran. But I think
his brother Tom's not bad either, is he?
Yeah, I think they're the sort of guys you want in your side. But when Archer's back, when Stokes is back, when Burns comes back, there's guys to come back into that side. I don't know where you fit him in, and I think if you want to play 5 bowlers, then I guess he plays. But then you've got Wokes, you've got Tom Curran, you've got Ollie Stone. We've got a very decent crop of fast bowlers in England at the moment. But
you certainly are talking up England, aren't you?
Absolutely, I'll always be talking up England. I'm slightly biased. Obviously we're having a non-biased discussion, but I'll never back England to lose. That's for sure. It's going to be a draw in India and a draw down under next winter. So.
All right, now let's just have a look at the state of play in this first test. Looks
Yep.
like Sri Lanka are all out for 135 in a disastrous fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Then England scored 421 with a double century to Root. It's quite incredible. They scored 421, yet Root scored 228 of those. So he scored a fair chunk of innings. And then Sri Lanka admirably went better in the second innings, got 359 and gave a slender lead to 70-odd runs, wasn't it? Is that correct? Yeah. So at the moment, England are
8 for 1.
8 for 1. Now, you would think that's an easy England victory, but you just don't know. The spinners could take some wickets there. But I think that's a remarkable result so far in this match. It all came from the first innings of Sri Lanka. They look like they completely botched that innings. Massively. And Crawley's been dropped as well, which is interesting in the test. So I think that 70-odd, 74, I think, to win is too. I don't think that'd be a problem. I think that we might make a hash of it because that's what we tend to do in these situations. But I think 120, 130 might have been more of a sweat. I think that might have been a tricky figure to chase, but
I don't see us not chasing 70. I know Crawley's just been dropped by Dick Weller, I think, behind the stumps, and that would have been 8 for 2, which is a bit of a shaky start. Sibley, the pundits seem to think he's got a big problem against spin, and it's tough. These conditions are alien. Has he ever played in Sri Lanka before? Has he ever played in the subcontinent before? It's tough, and you've got to find a way, and the best players will always find a way. I fully expect us to win the test and go 1-0 up. And even if we lose the second test, I think that a draw in Sri Lanka isn't the worst result. I think we'll win the second test. But as long as we don't lose the series, I think that it can't be a bad result.
So after the second test, they head to India, correct?
Yeah.
So that's a very short little tour, isn't it? There's only the 2 tests they've played
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's any one-days, but it's just 2 tests for sure, both at Gaul.
Yeah. And it's fun. I was quite amused how there's this one fan that's been there since about February when the original series was meant to take place last year, and he stayed on, and he's been a DJ in the local streets of Colombo or wherever.
Randy Caddick?
Randy, what's his name? Randy, what is it?
Randy Caddick, was it?
Randy Caddick, he changed his name, that's right. And they got him a ticket to get into the ground for the match, and he was the only fan on the Gaul fort on the so-called eastern end of the ground. No, actually the western end. And it's quite a story. And he's basically been trapped in Sri Lanka throughout COVID and got to see them play, which I think is a very amusing story. We have a few amusing stories in Australia, of course, which aren't that amusing, to be honest, with our crowds at the moment. There have been some very choice words they've used. In fact, forgetting the racial side of it, which has been well documented, the discussion around that, there was one that called Siraj a bloody grub. Now, that's Aussie slang for just being low or whatever, but it's still bad. It's still not good, but we'll move on from that. I think we prefer to have that one sole, pleasant supporter there that you guys have got in Sri Lanka. But yeah, you're right. It looks to me that the match between Australia and India is heading for a draw, and I wouldn't discount India winning that. And this particular test, as you said, is quite conclusively an England victory over Sri Lanka. And how could Sri Lanka, ever truly recover from their first innings? I think they yet again, they got 359, and in that particular performance, I see like Thiramani got a century. That's his second century playing for Sri Lanka. Mind you, he's played a number of tests and has been fairly ordinary throughout a long period. Not unlike Rohit Sharma a little bit, gets good 30s and 40s and gets out. But that was his second century. But Angelo Matthews got 71 now. He's an iconic player.
Yeah. And
I believe should still be captain of Sri Lanka, by the way, but he's not. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a great result for England.
I think Thiramani, from what they were suggesting, Thiramani was probably playing for his place. It was him and Mendes, because I think the captain, Karatnarai, if I get not good in my pronunciation there, so I apologise, but he'll obviously come back in. He's captain, I believe, isn't he? And he's been...
Karunaratne, that's right, yeah.
Karunaratne, sorry. So, I mean, fair play. If you go out in the third innings of a test match and get 100... if that's when your career's on the line, then that's, you've got to admire his, the resolve there, haven't you? So
true. All right, we've gone through firstly Australia versus India, and we've talked about Sri Lanka versus England. Now we're going to bring up the third topic, which is involving you as viewers. We're asking you for questions, whether it be to our Twitter handles, which in my case is at Norm Koch, NORMKOCH, and yours, Chris, is?
Vern158, VERN158.
As in at VERN?
Yes, VERN, sorry, yeah.
158. Right, so there are our Twitter handles, or obviously in the bottom of this video, you'll find a position to make comments as well. Either way is fine by us. So you've already asked us quite a few questions, some very interesting ones, actually. Now, Chris, what did you want to bring up as the question for today?
I had an interesting question. I think depending on how how people think, and then feel free to, if you like, the question side, but I had an interesting question. It was the first one that was asked by Marcus Lawrence, who's a guy actually I know from back home in England, and he asked, in the first video, we discussed the balls, Test cricket, and the use of the Duke's ball in England, the kookaburras in South Africa and Australia, and I believe it's the SS ball in India, and the guys might feel free to correct me there. And his question he posed was, is it time that the ICC bring in a standard Test cricket match ball? Is it right and fair that England get to use a ball, their own ball? Does it provide an unfair advantage? And do you think that it would level the playing field to have a standardised ball with the same seam, same make in every country across the world in Test cricket?
It's a great question. I mean, in my opinion, I do like the different balls, but it does creates a bit of variety. But I do think if you're going to look at a situation of a pink ball test, for example, the pink balls that are used, I'm pretty sure they're standard across the board because of their nature. They're unique. So it's created a level playing field with a pink ball. The white ball and I think there's a yellow version of the ball, which is used particularly in one-day matches, T20 matches. I think that's pretty well standardised as well. So that's interesting how that's happened in that format, one-day, T20, and then the pink ball versions of the tests. But in terms of traditional test matches, the red ball, we have got that inconsistency. My thoughts are those. I don't have a problem with it being different. What's yours, Chris?
No, I agree with you. I think it adds to. I completely see where the question is coming from and Marcus is coming from. I think that it adds a different challenge, isn't it? I don't think that it's giving an unfair advantage when you come to England and they're using a Duke's ball, but at the same time, and I'm not saying it happens, but what's the difference then between Australia producing a fast bouncy wicket at the Gabba because they know that the Indian side aren't used to a quick bouncy wicket, and historically in England, the wickets that seam and are a bit quicker, the subcontinent sides do struggle more against, and it's the same in South Africa. You go to Joburg or the Boring, and it's flying around your ears, and they produce that because they've had Donald, they've had Pollock, Rabada, Stain, Morkel, and it suits their strengths. And I agree with you. I don't think that I would change it. I think that it is a good thing, and if it's a good test for sides, and the best players will always find a way to counteract that, and I don't think that's a problem in my eyes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if it did come to a so-called vote, what ball would actually be used, and I wonder how strong the boards of England, Australia, and say BCCI would be in that factor, because they tend to be fairly much a triumvirate when it comes to decisions with that. So my thoughts are keep it the way it is, guys. Don't change it.
Agreed.
Now, you have a second question as well?
It was more a comment that led us in, I think, to what we said we'll discuss in our fourth and final, was just around the opening batting sort of role, and who do we feel is the best current opening batters in the world. And it was in the comments on our last YouTube section. I thought maybe if we're going to be doing a regular feature here, a regular video, that we could discuss and debate what our current favourite or best, in our opinion, opening batters are, and then maybe go next week we can do our best middle order batters and their best bowlers, and come up with our test team, our current test team. And just thought it might be fun. We can really engage people in the chat, and let I'd be really keen to see what people think their best test side is, and we can compare notes and go from there.
Well, let's just start with that. Let's look at the best opening batsman currently in the world.
Yep.
It's a difficult question because, quite frankly, a lot of the sides have had makeshift and shuffled opening batting positions due to injury, unavailability, could be even the COVID restrictions, God knows what. There's a lot of reasons why openers are not been playing. And also, when you mention an opener, do you mean an opening partnership to batsmen like a Hayden and Langer? Or that type of thing? Is that what you're alluding to?
No, I think individually for now. I mean, partnerships are a lot easier to think of. But I think especially if we're going to talk about what our current test best side is, and I think individual opening bats are probably the way to go. But
okay,
I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of sides, and I was having a look this morning in preparation of this, and there's probably only one bloke that stands out as probably the best opening bat in the world at the moment, and I don't want to say it because I don't particularly like the bloke, but it's got to be David Warner. 25.
Yeah, in terms of his overall batting.
Yeah, as a career, as a current player playing, and obviously forget his controversial side. And as I said, he's not a very popular guy in England at all. Obviously, take sandpaper, get out. But there was an incident where he punched Joe Root in a nightclub, or he's definitely not well liked. But if you're looking at numbers purely, then I don't see how, at the moment, compared to what we've got. I mean, obviously Alistair Cook retired a couple of years ago, and he would have obviously been first name on the list if you're going on opening bats. But David Warner, 24 Test hundreds. That's up there with the best, isn't it?
I can't help but think of people like Dean Elgar at the moment for South Africa. Mm-hmm. He's had a damn good performance as well. He's been very consistent. I think he scored quite a few centuries only recently as well. I think of as far as future opening batsmen are concerned, Shubman Gill is a name that I think will be very prominent in the future. Now, Rohit Sharma in India rather than in Australia, perhaps you would argue, is certainly up there as well. And even the likes of Bukowski could well become one of the best ones over time. But you're right. I'd say Warner, in my opinion. But let's get the opinion of the group. We'll get you to comment, and we'll try and bring together what the names are. And they can be from any country. Definitely, Rory Burns is probably admirable at this point too, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's obviously missing the test series in Sri Lanka. His wife's giving birth to a child. I think that it's an interesting one. I think that he's not particularly easy on the eye. But I think he's got potential. I think that England just lost another wicket, 14-3 England. A run out.
Wow.
Joe Root's been run out. So, yeah, I told you we wouldn't make it easy.
Yeah, no, that's wow, that's interesting. That's a bit awful.
We'll be ending the call if they lose a couple more. I can't be on here. No, I'm joking. I think Rory Burns is... I think that he's got a lot of respect. Might be wrong with the Australians. I think he got a couple of very decent, hard-worked hundreds in the Ashes. And, very young in his Test career. I think that it's him and Sibley as an opening pair are certainly not particularly good on the eye. They're certainly not got aesthetically pleasing techniques, but I think that there's potential there. And I think at the moment in world cricket there aren't a lot of great opening bats. If next week, if we talk about our favourite 3, 4, 5 and 6s, then that's going to be a lot harder, a lot more of a heated debate, I think, who we fit into that sort of middle order. But yeah, opening bats, I actually had 3 open. I had Warner, I had Dean Elgar and Rohit Sharma in India. I think it's probably fair.
And that's a pretty fair threesome, I'll tell you. That certainly is.
But that's, I don't particularly think Dean Elgar certainly won't be up there with the greats, but averages 40 in Test cricket, 13 Test hundreds. That's pretty good.
And he tends to bat when they most need him to bat well too. So that's another thing it doesn't always come down to the average. It's when they come together in their performances, especially in an opening position. Because I have a very strong feeling about openers. To me, an opening partnership is one of the strengths of Australia over many years, and we're lacking in that of late, hence our results, and somewhat down. Sharma and Gill, not the last innings, but the previous 2 innings, had 70 and 71, which are damn good opening stands.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting. And we could talk, okay, so we'll dictate, and I agree with you with Warner, I would say Elgar, and Rohit Sharma, but I will also throw Gill into the mix. They're my 4. I'll bring it down to 2, and we'll see what the viewers think as well. But that's a good conclusion to today's discussion, I think.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, thanks for your time. It's been great. So long enough, we might see England lose against Sri Lanka, but that's
hopefully not.
That's a hell of a wobble, isn't it? None of them got double figures. Anyway, guys, stay tuned. Thanks for your time. This is Norman Kochnick on Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochnick.